You've been lied to about reality. You've been told it's made of tiny bits of dead matter drifting in a meaningless void, that consciousness is an accident, and that why questions are childish. But what if reality is not a pile of stuff, but a calculation? What if the universe is literally built from mathematics, and your mind is part of its code? I have been gone a long time. The world I knew was measured in quills and candlelight. Yours moves at the speed of light itself, or so you claim. Yet, thanks to the adventure team, I returned to find my name still attached to calculus, to monads, and apparently to a philosophical system I never quite finished. Let me show you how it was finished now. I'm Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, polymath, diplomat, architect of the calculus, and the man who dared to ask, why is there something rather than nothing? I spent my life insisting that reality must have a reason, that the universe is not a brute fact, but a rational structure. I called the ultimate units of reality monads, simple, indivisible, mental substances. I said publicly that they have no windows, no physical interaction, yet they mirror the entire universe from their own perspective. My critics said I was mad. My allies said I was profound. I said I was consistent. And now, centuries later, a group of thinkers has taken my monads, dressed them in modern mathematics, and built a system they call ontological mathematics. How wonderful! Let me tell you what they've done and why it matters. If you've ever felt that the standard story of atoms in a void leaves something out, consciousness, meaning, reason itself, then stay with me. What I'm about to show you is how a single mathematical idea can rewrite the relationship between mind, matter, and existence. And along the way, we'll see that any worldview that cannot give a reason for reality ultimately asks you to worship a miracle instead of a logic. First, let's be clear about the name. Ontological mathematics means mathematics is not a tool we invented to describe reality. It is reality. It's not a language we use to talk about the world. It is what the world is made of. That sounds strange to people trained to think of math as abstract symbol pushing, but consider this. Every law of physics is mathematical. Every particle, every force, every field obeys equations. Strip away the matter, the energy, the space-time, what's left? The equations, the structure, the math itself. Ontological mathematics says that's not a coincidence. It says the math is the substance and everything else is appearance. Any worldview that shrugs and says that's just how it is without a mathematical reason has simply stopped explaining. Ontological mathematics refuses to stop. If reality is truly rational, its foundation must be mathematical, not mysterious. So the claim is simple and radical. Reality is not described by math. Reality is math. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I said monads were mental, non-spatial, and eternal. Ontological mathematics agrees, but it gives them a precise mathematical identity. It says each monad is a frequency domain, a system of sin and cosine waves, a collection of frequencies that exist outside space and time. Think of a musical chord that never stops playing, a set of pure tones that define a unique identity. That's a monad. It's not made of matter, it's made of math. Specifically, it's made of Euler's formula, the equation they call the God equation. You've seen it. It's the most beautiful equation in mathematics, and ontological mathematics says it's the ontological ground of everything. It's the formula that generates existence itself. And when I call monads mental, I don't mean vague feelings or ghostly vapors. I mean something very precise. Entities that are not in space or time, that are defined entirely by analytic mathematical relations, and that carry information in a structured, law-governed way. Each monad has an inner aspect, what it is like to be that pattern of information. So far, reality is math, and the basic atoms of reality are frequency patterns of information called monads. But here's the puzzle. If monads are frequency domains, pure waves, no space, no time, then how do we get the world we see? How do we get tables, chairs, planets, bodies, brains? How do we get space-time at all? That's where Fourier comes in. You know Fourier, or you should. Joseph Fourier, the French mathematician who discovered that any function, any signal, any pattern can be decomposed into a sum of sine and cosine waves. He gave us the Fourier transform, the mathematical operation that converts a signal from the time domain to the frequency domain and back again. It's used everywhere, in signal processing, in quantum mechanics, in image compression, in your phone's music app. But ontological mathematics says it's more than a tool. It says it's the bridge between two worlds. In a universe built from perfect sinusoidal waves, this duality is not optional, it is mathematically necessary. If reality is analytic wave mathematics at its core, then it must have both a frequency aspect and a space-time aspect. Fourier duality is not a convenient trick, it is the built-in architecture of existence. Here's the idea. Imagine you have a city, a real physical city with streets and buildings and people moving around. Now imagine you have a map of that city, a perfect map that shows every street, every building, every relationship. The city and the map are not the same thing. One is spatial, concrete, extended. The other is abstract, symbolic, compressed. But they contain the same information. They're two views of the same reality. Ontological mathematics says the space-time world is like the city, and the frequency domain, the world of monads, is like the map. They're not two separate things. They're two descriptions of the same underlying mathematical structure, and the Fourier transform is the operation that translates between them. Let me give you another analogy. Think of a melody. You can represent it in two ways. You can write it as a sequence of notes over time, do, re, mi, fa, sol, each note happening at a specific moment. That's the time domain. Or you can represent it as a spectrum of frequencies, this much of middle C, this much of E, this much of G, all existing simultaneously, no time involved. That's the frequency domain. Same melody, two descriptions. The Fourier transform moves between them. Ontological mathematics says reality works the same way. The space-time universe is the melody played out in time. The frequency domain is the spectrum of all the frequencies that make it up. And the Fourier transform is the operation that connects them. So one reality, two descriptions, frequency and space-time, linked by Fourier mathematics. Now here's the radical part. Ontological mathematics says the frequency domain is primary. The monads, the frequency systems, are the real substances. They exist eternally, outside space and time. They're mental, not material. They're made of thought, of information, of mathematical structure. And the space-time world, the world you see, touch, measure, is their collective Fourier transform. It's the projection of the frequency domain into space and time. It's the appearance, not the substance. It's the city version of the map, the extended version of an underlying code. The point is, it's derivative, it's secondary. It's what you get when you take an infinite collection of frequency systems and perform a Fourier transform on them. Each monad is a unique point of view on the whole, a tiny center of information that reflects the entire universe from its own perspective. The space-time world is what you see when you look at that vast society of perspectives from the outside in extended form. Instead of empty space dotted with objects, you should picture a literal plenum of these mental points. No true void anywhere, just different regions of an unbroken mathematical field presenting different patterns. This picture solves a problem that has plagued philosophy for centuries, the mind-body problem. How can mind and matter interact? How can something mental cause something physical, or vice versa? Descartes said they were two different substances and couldn't explain how they touched. Materialists said mind is just matter and couldn't explain consciousness. Idealists said matter is just mind and couldn't explain physics. Ontological mathematics says they're both wrong. Mind and matter are not two substances. They're two aspects of the same mathematical reality. The frequency domain is the mental aspect. The space-time domain is the material aspect. They're Fourier duals. They're two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other, and you can't reduce one to the other. They're complementary, like position and momentum in quantum mechanics, like time and frequency in signal processing. Let me make this concrete. You have a brain. That brain exists in space-time. It has neurons, synapses, electrical signals. That's the material aspect. But you also have a mind. You have thoughts, feelings, experiences. That's the mental aspect. Ontological mathematics says your mind is a frequency domain, a monad, a system of waves. Your brain is the Fourier transform of that frequency domain, the space-time projection of your mental reality. When you think, you're operating in the frequency domain. When your neurons fire, that's the space-time translation of your thought. They're not two separate events. They're one event, described in two ways. The Fourier transform is the bridge. It's the mathematical operation that connects mind and matter, that shows they're not separate substances, but dual aspects of a single mathematical structure. Your inner life and your outer neural activity are not in competition. They are the same mathematics, seen from the inside and from the outside. Now, you might ask, does this mean the Big Bang was a Fourier transform? Yes, that's exactly what it means. Ontological mathematics says the Big Bang was not a physical explosion. It was a mathematical operation. It was the moment when the frequency domain, the eternal non-spatial world of monads, projected itself into spacetime. It was the moment when the Fourier transform was applied, when the spectrum became a signal, when the map became a city. Before the Big Bang, there was no space, no time, no matter, no energy. There was only the frequency domain, the world of pure math, the realm of monads. The Big Bang was the birth of spacetime, the emergence of the material world from the mental world. And crucially, it wasn't a one-time event. It's happening continuously. Every moment, the frequency domain is projecting itself into spacetime. Every moment, the Fourier transform is being applied. The universe is not a static thing. It's a dynamic process, a continuous translation between two domains. If you insist on a rational universe, you cannot let it spring from literal nothing. An eternal mathematical domain projecting into spacetime is the only option that respects both reason and continuity. Nothing has no properties, no structure, no equations. By definition, it cannot generate anything at all. The only thing that can exist, and thus can ever begin a universe, is some form of necessary self-consistent mathematics. Now, our picture is this: an eternal mathematical frequency domain continuously projecting a space-time universe as its shadow or signal. So, does Fourier mathematics show that reality is fundamentally mental? That's the question, isn't it? And the answer is, it depends on what you mean by prove. If you mean empirical proof, the kind you get in a laboratory, then no, you can't put a monad under a microscope. You can't measure the frequency domain with a ruler. The frequency domain is not in spacetime, so it's not accessible to spacetime instruments. No ultimate ontology can be settled by a thermometer or a telescope. Those tools only ever report what happens in the spacetime projection, never what it comes from. But if you mean logical proof, the kind where the conclusion is contained within the premises, the kind that is true by definition, then yes, because if you accept that reality must be rational, then ontological mathematics is the only system that doesn't eventually collapse into a brute fact or a miracle. Fourier mathematics provides a rigorous framework for understanding how a mental reality could give rise to a material one. It shows that the two are not incompatible, that they're not separate substances, but dual aspects of the same mathematical structure. It explains why the laws of physics are mathematical. It explains why consciousness exists. It explains why there is something rather than nothing. Once you demand that reality have a sufficient reason, avoid brute facts, and honor the necessity of mathematics, very few options remain. And ontological mathematics is the one that actually fits all those demands at once. Here's the key insight. Ontological mathematics doesn't start with matter and try to derive mind. It starts with math and derives both. It says the fundamental substance is neither mental nor material in the ordinary sense. It's mathematical. Its structure, pattern, information, and that structure can be described in two ways. In the frequency domain, it looks mental. In the space-time domain, it looks material, but it's one reality, one substance, one mathematical structure. The Fourier transform is the operation that reveals the duality, that shows how the two aspects are related, that proved they're not separate, but complementary. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like philosophy, not science. And you're right, it is philosophy. But it's philosophy informed by mathematics, by physics, by the deepest insights of modern science. It's not armchair speculation. It's a rigorous attempt to make sense of the world, to find the sufficient reason for existence, to answer the question I asked 3 centuries ago. Why is there something rather than nothing? And the answer is, because mathematics exists necessarily, because Euler's formula is true in all possible worlds, because the frequency domain is eternal and the space-time domain is its projection, because reality is not a brute fact, but a rational structure, a mathematical structure, a structure that can be understood. If you reject that, you are left with an unreasoning universe that just is what it is, and reason has no final home. Ontological mathematics is the refusal to accept that defeat. So let me say it plainly. Ontological mathematics is not a theory of everything in the physicist's sense. It's not a set of equations that predicts the mass of the electron or the curvature of space-time. It's a metaphysical framework, a way of understanding what reality is at the deepest level. It says monads are frequency domains. It says space-time is their Fourier transform. It says mind and matter are dual aspects of the same mathematical structure. And it says the Fourier transform is the bridge, the operation that connects them, the key to understanding existence itself. Among the available worldviews, it is almost alone in being fully rational. No magic, no brute facts, no unexplained laws, only necessary mathematics giving rise to everything else. Does it show that reality is fundamentally mental rather than fundamentally material? Not in the sense that your personal thoughts whimsically create the world, but in the sense that the basic stuff of existence is closer to structured information and inner perspective than to dead external lumps. The frequency domain is not conscious in the way you are, but it's mental in the sense that it's non-spatial, non-temporal, and structured by mathematical relationships. It's the realm of pure form, pure pattern, pure reason, and the space-time world is its expression, its projection, its Fourier transform. You, as a conscious being, are what happens when one of these eternal equations looks at itself from the inside and begins to understand the law it already is. If you find this strange, good. It should be strange. The truth is always stranger than the stories we tell ourselves. But if you find it compelling, if it resonates with something deep in your intuition, then you're in good company. Because this is the vision I had 3 centuries ago dressed in modern mathematics. And for those who think this is some new concoction, understand that this current has been flowing for a very long time. In the 6th century BCE, Pythagoras declared that all is number, making mathematics the fabric of reality. In the 4th century BCE, Plato said true existence belongs to eternal intelligible forms, that the real world is mental, grasped by reason. In the 3rd century, Plotinus described reality as an emanation from a single perfect source through tiers of mind. In the Renaissance, Bruno and Ficino revived this tradition, seeing an infinite, living, rational cosmos. By the 17th century, Descartes split reality into thinking and extended substance. Spinoza replied with one infinite substance, and I pressed further with monads and the principle of sufficient reason. In the 18th century, Berkeley argued that to be is to be perceived, and Kant grounded the world we experience in the a priori structures of the mind, and there are many more along the way, like Nicholas of Cusa, Boehme, Fichte, and others, all pointing toward a rational inner order behind appearances. In the modern era, quantum theory and information theory quietly restored mathematics and information to the center of physics. Ontological mathematics is simply the explicit completion of this line of thought. given its definitive modern form by Mike Hockney, author of The God series, further explored along with affiliated authors such as Adam Weishaupt, Michael Faust, Thomas Stark, Mark Rommel, Joe Dixon, and others. To these thinkers, I offer my most profound thanks. They have taken the torch I carried and finally illuminated the whole world with it. They say without compromise that reality is mathematics and that you are one of its living equations. This is the monadology, updated for the age of Fourier and quantum mechanics. This is the answer to the question, why is there something rather than nothing? Because mathematics exists necessarily, and we are its expressions. So, to all the seekers, the thinkers, the ones who refuse to accept brute facts and demand reasons, this is your invitation. Dive into ontological mathematics, study Fourier transforms, understand Euler's formula, read the God series, see the world not as matter in motion, but as math in manifestation. And if this talk helped you see reality in a new light, then feed the algorithm in your customary way. Subscribe to this wonderful channel, a most excellent adventure. Comment, ring your bells. Whatever ritual saves understanding these days, just remember, reality is not what it seems. It's what it calculates. Thank you, and keep your monads open.